A congratulatory phone call? Why not answer? What's the worst that can happen? Donald Trump, unabashed since he took that call from Taiwan's nationalist president, a first since Washington switched diplomatic allegiances from Taipei to Beijing in 1979. It's becoming clear as mud, though. Trump now naming a pro-Beijing ambassador to China. Which way is he leaning? Official media on the mainland calling it rookie diplomacy on his part. That might be giving the Donald the benefit of the doubt. Reports out of the U.S. point to tireless lobbying on behalf of Taiwan by former Senator, Vice President, and 1996 White House candidate Bob Dole. Is Trump easier to sway than he claimed on the campaign trail, or are we witnessing a thought-out strategy and shift in U.S. policy? The election is over. Trump still vowing to get tougher on China than Obama ever did, most notably over trade. What U.S. policy now for the region? How will Beijing really react? Today in the France 24 debate, Taiwan on the line. With us from Los Angeles, he was a Trump delegate from California. James Lacey's a former trade official in the Reagan administration, the author of Taxifornia. Thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate.
Happy to be here.
Here in the studio, we're joined by Chunyan Lee, founder of FEDA Consulting, who brings together European business people and Chinese.
Yeah, right.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
We have two people who watch who follow the money, as it were, between Paris and Beijing. Andre Loz Krog-Pietri, the founder of A Capital.
Good evening.
Thanks for being with us. And political scientist Alice Ekman of the French Institute of International Relations. Ifri, welcome back.
Thank you.
The France 24 debate, where you can join the conversation, and you have on Facebook and Twitter, hashtag F24debate. Before we go into the latest, and it's evolving fast, let's roll the clock back to the weekend when the phone rings at Trump Tower. Catherine Viette picks up the story.
China fumes as Donald Trump forges ahead, keeping both Beijing and Washington guessing about his intentions. It all started with a phone call from the president of Taiwan, a serious breach of diplomatic protocol. Trump's advisors have sought to downplay the exchange as they struggle to explain his recent actions.
This was a courtesy call. The democratically elected president of Taiwan called to congratulate the president-elect.
We do billions of dollars in business with them, and all he did was receive a phone call. I think everybody should just calm down. He's aware of what our nation's policy is.
Meanwhile, Trump has gone on another Twitter tirade, aggressively challenging China's trade and military policies.
Did China ask us if it was okay to devalue their currency, making it hard for our companies to compete, heavily tax our products going into their country, the US doesn't tax them, or to build a massive military complex in the middle of the South China Sea? I don't think so.
Trump's actions have left many in Washington scratching their heads.
It's unclear exactly what the strategic effort is, what the aim of the strategic effort is. I'll leave that to them to explain.
Beijing has hit back through its state media, warning that Trump will in time learn not to cross China, and that this diplomatic rookie needs help in adapting to his new role. Adversaries and allies alike are finding Trump's unpredictability unnerving, as they question whether he's carrying out planned strategies or just acting on impulse.
All right, that report there by Catherine Viette. Now, the latest piece of information we're getting, and it's important, is the naming of the governor of Iowa, who will be the new ambassador to Beijing. His name is Terry Branstad. He's been governor for a long time. He's had several stints. The news welcomed by the foreign ministry, which called Branstad an old friend. There you see him with Xi Jinping. He's an old friend not just because China is one of Iowa's biggest export markets, but because he has a personal relationship with Xi. We found an old clipping from the Muscatine Journal. Muscatine is a city in Iowa. This is from 1985. A certain Xi Jinping on an agricultural exchange program. He led a 2-week trip with a delegation from his province and stayed 3 days in Muscatine. So, Alice Ekman, we're confused. Help us here. On the one hand, taking that phone call from Taiwan's president. On the other hand, naming what has got to be the best possible ambassador to Beijing.
Yeah, we're confused, and it's quite likely that we will remain confused for quite some time. Because we are in a period of transition, and also because Trump's policy toward China is not clear, or at least has not been clearly stated publicly. And I think that might be a characteristic, a feature of its foreign policy itself, to test, or strategically or not, we don't know exactly. But
to keep everyone guessing?
Yeah, I mean, from Chinese perspective, they were aware that he was China bashing during the campaign, right? But they thought that potentially after the election, he would maybe adjust his statement and his foreign policy, or at least define a more subtle foreign policy. And it has been often the case during presidential campaign in the US. The campaign is, it can be tough on China, and you can use words that are specific to campaign trail. And then you have, let's say the protocol and the rhetoric of foreign policy is coming back. The change here is that it seems that Trump is not following any of these diplomatic, traditional skills, rhetorics, and protocol that any, I would say, many countries would expect. So I think it was unpredictable, and that unpredictability may remain for quite some time.
André Loos-Krug-Pietri, does his madness have a reason?
Well, I think personally that it becomes more and more amusing and entertaining to see President Trump, because actually, I don't know if it's thought out, but...
you don't know if it's thought out?
I don't know if it's thought out. I mean, I think nobody knows. It was wonderful to hear the State Department kind of guessing what kind of policy that was, what you just showed. But I think, having lived a lot of negotiation in China, I would even say that Trump is getting a little bit Chinese. He's doing the cold and the warm. He's naming Branstad, who is obviously old classmate of Xi, who met him on like very young tours in the 80s. And on the other side, having this very, breaching with 35, 40 years of diplomatic tradition, where you had this consensus, this very well thought words which were used. And I think actually negotiation has begun. This guy is actually a great negotiator.
All right, before I get James Lacey's reaction, Yann Li, that's very important what André just said, because I have friends, French businessmen, who, when they go to China, tell us that it's really difficult because sometimes the person you meet is not the one who's really making the decisions.
That's true, yeah.
And so you always have to play this sort of game where you have to keep the other side guessing. And do you agree with André that Trump is becoming Chinese?
Yeah, to some extent, yes, because at the beginning, I think we Chinese expected Trump to be pragmatic or realistic, because he has been a very successful businessman. So that's why the core between Trump and Taiwan has surprised not only the Chinese government, but also Chinese people. Because at the beginning, we thought that he would be more focused on the business side, taking a more pragmatic approach, rather than talking a lot about, the values, the political system differences. And that's why this time we don't really understand, what's in the mind of Trump in discussing with Taiwan. But in my opinion, I think it has been planned. Why? Firstly, there was an article published on New York Times yesterday, and we said that according to New York Times, that Bob Dole has been working over the last 6 months, to try to help establish the contacts between Taiwan and Trump's staff.
Yeah, let's just remind our viewers of that. The New York Times, among several media, reporting that 93-year-old Bob Dole, former senator, vice president, was paid $140,000 through a Washington law firm to lobby on behalf of Taiwan. The paper combing through public records that lobbyists are required to file by law in the U.S. The news website Politico goes further, saying those lobbying efforts were successful in making the Republican Party platform at the Republican convention the most pro-Taiwan ever. Yann Li, you're saying that there really is a Taiwan pivot on the part of Trump?
Yes, because I think he wants to play the Taiwan card, Firstly, I think he wanted to take advantage of the fact that he's still in the transition period, which means he hasn't yet been officially the president of the USA. It will be next year from January. So he takes advantage of this fact and then tries to test the internal reaction inside the USA to see if he can get more support on this new attitude facing China, and also to test the international reaction, especially facing China, to see the impact or the reaction of Chinese government when we touch the bottom line. I mean, this is really a bottom line of Chinese government. So I think, in my analysis, I think he really wants to test the reaction to be better prepared for his official presidency. Yeah.
James Lacey, do you agree with that? That this is basically testing public opinion, both in China and the United States, before his inauguration?
I think it's some ado about really nothing. The foreign policy of Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton was always, let's talk, let's keep the channels open. And this was a call that was made by the president of Taiwan, a democratically elected person, to congratulate Trump. It really wasn't a breach of protocol. Trump is not the president yet. But imagine if Trump had turned down a call from the president of France. And the reason I say that is because Taiwan, in their trade relationship with the United States, is about as important as the trade relationship the United States has with France. So we need to get real. Taiwan is a good actor in terms of our trade. We do have the U.S. does have a small trade deficit with Taiwan, as it does with France. But with respect to China, we've got this huge trade deficit, and we have all of these bad acts. They've devalued their currency to take advantage of Western nations and the United States. They've put terrible taxes on U.S. companies like GM and Chrysler, and they actually even lost a case that they brought against us in the World Trade Organization with respect to those tariffs. And we know they're building their military in the South China Sea, which is just going to cost the United States and the Western powers and the Japan and Taiwan more in terms of unnecessary military spending. But here's the biggest deal. The Chinese are the biggest polluters in the world. I'm sitting here in Los Angeles, and it's measurable, the pollution that comes over the Pacific Ocean from China. China needs to change its actions on the international stage, and I think that Donald Trump, because he made
for the
this part of his
smog in Los
campaign,
Angeles,
will speak to that.
You're blaming China for the smog in Los Angeles?
No, I'm telling you that the smog in Los Angeles can be measured in part by pollution that comes across the Pacific Ocean from China. Do you know Greenpeace has said that there are 300 cities in China where the pollution is so bad that it exceeds the 2015
Okay, that's China, though. It's not Los Angeles. Alice Ekman, let me get
1.6 million. No, well, it's true. Look, what I'm telling you is true.
but
China is a contributor.
But that doesn't prove that it's responsible for the smog in LA.
They are. That's how bad it is.
Alice Ekman, James Lacey saying that in fact Taiwan is a more important trade partner for the United States than France.
I didn't say that.
What did you say?
They are as important as France.
As important as France.
First of all, I don't think it's accurate to compare Taiwan and France, because both countries don't have the same diplomatic status, right? We're talking about diplomatic status and type of diplomatic practices.
I'm talking about fact. In fact, they have basically the same trade. They're
we
of the
all
same
know.
trade importance to the U.S.
No, we all know that diversity of countries, independently on the nature of the diplomatic relation with Taiwan, they have economic relation with Taiwan. So we know that a lot of trade is going on between France and Taiwan, between the US and Taiwan, between many Southeast Asian countries and Taiwan. Taiwan is actually developing a new southbound policy to promote this trade link. So we know about this. It's not about trade links here that we're analyzing. The issue is about diplomatic relations, right? Taiwan has a special diplomatic status on the international scene due to the conflict that has been going on for decades, since 1949 onwards. So it's a very specific status, right? And that position means that if you look at independently of opinions and parties and Republican and Democrat, if you just look at the phone call from a political scientist viewpoint, from an analyst viewpoint, the phone call is a breach in the protocol, not just the phone call itself, but the coverage of the phone call. Why? Because there was a strong mediatic coverage about, calls may exist, right? But the disclosure and the coverage, public coverage of the call has a significance and has a weight on diplomatic communication. What I mean by this is that there was coverage encouraged by Taiwanese side, but also by the American side, because most of all, what may have hurt Beijing or may have, I would say, pissed off, we could say, as a Chinese authority, the PRC authority, is that Trump mentioned the fact that Tsai was the president of Taiwan. So if you mention Tsai as the president of Taiwan, this, yes, means officially that the US recognize the state of Taiwan. And this means an end of the one China policy. At least that's how Beijing is thinking. Independently of opinion, we have to put things into context. What about practices? Taiwan
it is a strange relationship, isn't it? Because Taiwan, on the one hand, there's the U.S. recognizes Beijing diplomatically, but gives military assistance to Taiwan.
No, we know there is equivalent of an embassy, U.S. embassy in Taiwan, the equivalent of a French embassy in Taiwan. They are doing the same job. It's just that they don't have this etiquette. They don't have this label for diplomatic reasons, right? Taiwan has managed to promote a very efficient informal diplomacy, right? Using business ties, using cultural ties, like many diplomacy is using, but Taiwan has to do so to bypass the limitation that is facing at the official level. So I think we have, when we explain the importance of this call to the general public, we have just to put things into context. It's just, symbols and reference are very important in a very important part of tension between Beijing and Taipei.
André-Louis Krog-Petry, let me ask you, the French businesses, for them, it's just this parallel universe. Politics is one thing, business is another, and it's all fine and good? Or are people surprised by this telephone call?
Well, you're talking about the business community in China?
Or in France.
Or in France. Well, I think for people who have done business in China, and this has been my case for the last 15 years almost, everybody knows that in China you cannot separate politics from business. So everything is business. So the ultimate pragmatist, us sitting in Beijing, Deng Xiaoping was this famous ultimate pragmatist. And on the other side, everything is political because everything is steered towards goals which are set by the state. And so I think people who are dealing with China are probably surprised that a Western politician, and Donald Trump is, that we like it or not, a politician, and now the next president of the US, is actually, I think, using tools that have been actually at the core of Chinese policy, because there's always this misunderstanding that, with China, you need never to say the truth, the famous face-saving topic, or that you need to be extremely straightforward and never changing your strategy, because otherwise you are seen as somebody who's changing opinion all the time. Nicolas Sarkozy was bashed for that in China, for changing opinion or jumping around all the time. But when you look at Chinese policy, I mean, the way sometimes things are done in China and towards the allies of China is sometimes extremely tough. And on the other side, changes of policies. Talk about foreign businesses. I mean, they were very welcome. Today, you can really feel that there's a closure of China. There's this official policy of local innovation. So I think that's why I was saying it's very amusing to see Donald Trump becoming Chinese. And it might be a way, I'm absolutely not in favor of Trump, but I think actually, if you want to make a reset on the way politicians are working, he is actually also resetting maybe this world of diplomacy that became completely absent.
Resetting the world of diplomacy. We're going to pick up on that when we come back. Stay with us. You're watching the France 24 debate.